Hi, friends. Hello, the world. Here's Isel, or Monova, and with my special guest, Navshika. Navshika, I'll let you introduce yourself. And I just wanted to say that today we decided to talk about a topic that I think is somehow not easy to talk about, or I don't know, we restrain ourselves to talk about the topic of spirituality. And we've had an amazing conversations before, and I thought that we would just have a conversation about it without making it sound very logical or structured, or the way that we usually do in our lives to make sense in the way that everyone understands, or but just showing or sharing our experiences around the topic of spirituality. So that's why I welcome you, Nafshika. Thank you so much for joining. And yeah, tell us all the things.
So, I am a policy consultant by background. I work with a lot of NGOs, local and international, also work within the public sector and private sector. So, I have a whole kind of range of generalist policy experience. And I also do have experience working within international development. Over the years, especially, I have become a bit more, I guess, observant of the fact that there are a lot of failings within the kind of international humanitarian space. And it dawned on me that from my own personal development and my own interest in spirituality, that there was almost a bridge, there was a disconnect between the things that we do internally to better ourselves and the inability sometimes to be able to use that personal development or that spiritual development and to perform our roles in a higher kind of consciousness.
Yeah.
So I am working on kind of bridging that gap and creating at the moment, I'm in the kind of development phase of creating a framework that kind of maps how to move your spiritual, I guess, identity more into your leadership capability, into your work, whether that is in the international development space or otherwise, because it doesn't have to be. Any spiritual work that you do can be beneficial. It doesn't have to be in your job. It could also be in the way that you show up to friends, family, community, your home.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, yeah, what I'm working.
Amazing. Amazing. So I guess that always, brings me to the question of what is that spirituality that we're talking about and how we experience it, right? So, and I reflected on that on myself as well, because I used to consider myself not a spiritual person, and also I consider myself not a religious person, right? So and then lately I've been experiencing this sense of, first, so the curiosity from my side came from, I also worked in humanitarian, and we talk a lot about human dignity. We talk about the worthiness. We talk about hope, right? So the words, the concepts that are so difficult to define or say, this is what it is, yet this is what we're all striving towards and wanting to have, or feeling it and experiencing. And I think for me, spirituality came into play to talk about things that are difficult to explain, yet we feel it.
Mhm.
Difficult to put into words, yet we feel in our bodies, and we feel like so being essential part of it. And noticing them when we get hurt, or noticing them when we feel the pain, and noticing them when we're in difficult situations, and wanting to somehow restore, or wanting to be back to being that worthy person, back to being that unique person, back to being that person who doesn't need to be achieving things in order to be worthy, or doesn't need to be, having success in life in order to be worthy, right? So I think in those terms, I have realized that spirituality for me was that topic that I just can be, and not prove or not show and be doing things, but rather feeling that belonging to the universe, to this world, feeling that I am worthy no matter what the circumstances around me. And I don't need to be explaining it. I can just feel it. And that's, I think, where my spirituality comes in. In Yeah, and I just wanted to share it. So maybe we can talk a bit about what is spirituality for you and how you experience it.
Yeah, so I think spirituality for me is entering the states of higher consciousness.
Mm,
I know some people will see it synonymously with, I don't know, having an affinity with God or the divine, the eternal, whatever you want to call it. And I think that is one part of it for me,
mm,
because it's absolutely kind of an acknowledgement of a higher power at play, or a great mystery that is,
mm,
shrouds our earth and our existence. But in terms of the practicality of that, because I think that those questions surrounding God and divinity are around, I guess, your existential questions or awareness of why you are here, the things that you will never know for sure, but it's a part of you that wonders. But
mm,
I also think that in a practical sense, your spirituality is, for me, synonymous with your higher consciousness state and way of being. And we all know that there are, on a scale of emotions, if you like, not that one is better than the other, they are just opposites. So
yeah.
you've got lower scale emotions, which people would say is perhaps synonymous to lower consciousness, lower
Mm,
types of emotions, things that kind of associated to be negative, as well as the higher ones like joy and bliss and peace. And I associate those kinds of things with, to be embedded with your spirituality, really, because the more aware you become of yourself, your shortcomings, the more you understand that you won't always remain in those higher states of consciousness, that you will gravitate between the lower and the higher, and those things are just natural. And I think that in the conversation, what you've just described, I feel like so much of society, our systems, the way we operate are centered around the assumption that human beings only operate at this lower end of
mm,
consciousness. It's quite like when I look at the way a lot of political or legal systems are founded, it's centered on the idea that humans without enough structure, law, and order or discipline would fall prey to their animalistic, anarchical ways of being. But when I think about my spirituality, I don't think that that's true, because walking more in the path of spirituality has afforded me the opportunity to actually be more aware. Um, and with that awareness means that I'm able to see in a moment of perhaps being persuaded by my ego to cause more destruction, perhaps in my actions, words, or thoughts. I pause, I'm able to hear my intuition and to say, hold on, I don't know if that's the best response to give. And actually, can I do something about this in a courageous, perhaps compassionate way?
yeah.
And all those things, when I embed that spirituality in how I operate in the world, allows me to show up as a better person.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love that idea of embedding spirituality in whoever we're being. And and I think that for me, whenever I think about it, it gives me the sense of, stop searching for more or stop searching for being enough. Like we often have this sense of, oh, I'm not enough if XYZ, right? Or like I was saying, that I'm not worthy if I don't get this success or this money or this achievement in my life. But rather, when we, I think, embed that spirituality, it allows us to be um, aware of where we are and also aware of what we have and yeah, and be, I think, grateful of also of just existing in the world, contributing to the world in the way that we like to be contributing, and not necessarily as to what the society wants us be doing this or that, and if you're not productive in quotes, then you're not really, part of it, or you can't really be part of it, and being in a way punished for it. So that's why I think embedding spirituality, I so agree that it has this element of no rushing, element of being present, element of um, enjoying your being as a unique human being on this earth. Like, I'm always fascinated by however many billions of us, yet we are so unique, even if we are twins, or even if we are, I don't know, born in the same day and minute and seconds, but we're still unique and different, right? So, and that's why I think spirituality has that sense of taking care of myself in the times when my ego or my other, like I call it a default brain, that brain that wants to survive, the brain that says no, 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 we have to go through and ignore the queue and just to go to the front because we need to be getting whatever we need to be getting, but rather saying no, 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 I'm fine. I don't need to be surviving. I can also just be and be present with myself. So yeah, so I love that idea. And I think coming back to the system that we're talking about, Navshika, that and obviously I'm a believer more of, if we want to change systems, we always need to start with an individual. And I know that not many people agree with me, but that's fine. But my belief is that if we can get each individual to believe and to trust in their higher powers, like you were saying, right? If we can get people to trust that they actually can be part of the change or change the system in the way that suits us well, and not really keep being like resisting and keep saying that something is wrong with it, yet not really being able to change something, but rather starting with our own change. So how can we use, I guess the question it comes to my mind is, how can we use spirituality to that, in that context of whatever we are in the system, we are probably always in whatever the system we're in, whether we're working or not working, whether we are, in our societies, communities, right? So there's always a structure that we are somehow surrounded by. There's always some type of a system, for the lack of a better word. So how can we use spirituality to make the change we want, I guess, is the question.
So the way that I see it in this kind of framework that I'm working at the moment, I kind of think of it in my head in three strands, if you like. So one is conditioning, then the second is connection to yourself, and the third is consciousness, usually a higher form of consciousness. I think wherever we are, we all automatically start off on the level of conditioning, because that's just the way that we were raised. That's the systems that we're born to. It's the parents' education of us, that parents are just doing what was taught to them or mimicking the kind of behaviors that they experience. And then, of course, you go into the educational system and you're conditioned there, and you're conditioned by society. And then we're conditioned almost into knowing the problems in society and on the lookout for things, and we can understand where we fit in the kind of, I guess, the social hierarchy of society, our workplace, our friendship groups, whatever it is, right? So I think in the first instance, rather than blaming the wider system, the environment, or the conditioning that we've all been given, the first step would be to move into connection to yourself, to understand that you can't change anything on the outside unless you have become at peace on the inside. And of course, we see this happen so much because there are people who are in, fantastic position, to make great opportunity for change, such as leaders of great international charities, for example, who are very aware that there are a lot of staff or people who work overseas who are actually causing more destruction. Though that they are on socially or in a conditioned way of being, they are here in positions that are highly respected in society. For example, if you work for a highly esteemed international organization, if you've got the label of being a humanitarian, if you are a leader in that space, it's assumed that you are a great ethical, morally, astute person, but that's not necessarily true, and we know that. And I think the reason for that is because people haven't had that self-connection. They've learnt to operate and find the areas that best suit them within the social condition construct to make them feel good about themselves or to create safety for themselves.
Yeah.
Whereas in my experience, with the frustrations and things that I have seen in my own personal life, it's the connection to self that's really important, because if you work on bettering who you are, it goes without saying that you are less likely to cause destruction or to participate in the kind of mass conditioned consciousness. You're more likely to hold an awareness in yourself, to be grounded, to see it objectively, and to not rush to your ego animalistic brain, which many of us are conditioned to operate in. But actually within you, you have found that there is actually a higher consciousness. You've experienced moments of bliss or peace that are of your doing. You got there through your own commitment to self, whether it's by a ritual, whether it's by meditation, whether it's by personal development, time alone, solitude, whatever it has taken for you. It's a way of you, I guess I would say, taking discipline and responsibility for your own actions, your own awareness, your own thoughts, and making sure you show up better. And for me, that has translated in, I know that can sound quite vague. So what I mean by that is when you do those things, when you do go into work now, or where you are seeing an injustice or something unfair happening, rather than responding in a conditioned way of being, which would probably be something like, how dare they? I can't believe that this is happening to me. Or it perpetuates this feeling that your identity, is constantly being written and rewritten by higher powers at play. You're going into that context and you're saying, do you know what? I see what's going on here. And I know that I feel good and I'm at peace internally. Whatever your perception of me is incorrect. I'm probably sensing that this person is going through certain things, or I can recognize those behaviors or traits in that person because I also was once there. And it's not like I will never be there either. We're human. Anything that rocks us, that ruins our kind of personal safety or security, would undoubtedly make us probably act in a more animalistic sense. And that's just normal. But when you are constantly connecting to self and consciousness, you're more likely to look at it at a distance, not be offended by it.
Yeah.
And probably more likely to engage your higher rational thinking brain that's searching for creative ways to improve the system.
Yeah.
And I think on the flip side of that, you've got a lot of people who are thriving within this conditioned way of being. And it's funny because so many of them, even the good intended people who haven't taken time to reflect on spirituality or whatever, are doing great work trying to create solutions and ways forward to improve, society or their jobs or whatever. But studies actually show that when you engage continuously in a form of meditation or something that engages your higher consciousness, it does change and rewire your brain and make you more conducive to creative opportunities. And when you look at the great minds such as Einstein or like, I think, who is it? I think Leonardo da Vinci, these key figures were all people who were multidisciplined people. They were not focused in just one area. They were probably artists, mathematicians, scientists. There were things that society would tell you, hold on, you need to box yourself in to one thing. And if you are a person of breadth, you're probably not a master of anything. You're kind of a jack of all trades. But actually, the greatest minds are people who are multidisciplinary. And often within that, spirituality is one of those disciplines that you must employ in order to be better at everything.
Mm. Amazing. I love that. So I think for me, it's always been that idea of, always going back to your own internal wisdom for answers rather than being told or rather than learning from outside and saying this is the supposed to be the answer, right? And I think whenever I say that we could go inner world and looking for answers within ourselves so that we can contribute in the new ways that hasn't been tried before or hasn't been employed because we are finding answers from within, then I think that's where that spirituality that I think of comes in as well. Knowing and trusting and recognizing that we all have amazingness within us that we can contribute from, right? And what I also love about what you're saying is that, in coaching terms, I guess, at least I would say that, the first thing is we can't really show or give love or worthiness or show respect to other people if we're not really doing it with ourselves, right? So it's like with anything else in life that if you don't have that skill or if you haven't really practiced it or experienced it yourself, it's difficult to show to other people that this is what you have. And even if you try to do that, it sounds as if like we're trying to pretend it or we're trying to fake it until we make it kind of a situation. So that's why I think once we connect with ourselves and we learn how to really recognize our own powers and our own love and worthiness and dignity, then we are more capable of recognizing that in other people and also recognizing their uniqueness, recognizing their ways of contribution the way that we want to do that as well. So I think that brings us to, like you're saying, that not resorting to reacting all the time and reacting to things in ways that is not really conducive to finding a solution, but more what do I really want to, or who do I really want to be in this situation, right?
Mhm.
And how do I want to react in this situation, and not just using whatever the conditioning or the pattern or the habit that I'm so used to going for all the time because I don't really have time to reflect or I'm too busy fixing things
Yeah.
rather than being and wanting to do things the way that we want to, looking at the long term perspectives of things. So that's why I love that idea of, resorting spirituality to higher powers within ourselves or outside of us or whoever we believe is that a power is, resorting to that and finding answers there rather than um, always being in this reactive mode. And I think the other thing that comes to mind in this context is that I have learned from my own experience, and I know that many people also share this experience, that whenever we're not trusting our powers and whenever we're not trusting even the higher powers outside of us, for for me, what's relatable more is that trusting myself. This is how I can relate more. So whenever I'm not trusting myself, I know that I use my actions as a way to fix it, as a way to get to the result as fast as I can, because I'm trying to use that action as a way to, make myself believe that this is happening. So what happens in the end, however, is that the more I try to, do things and be in meetings and getting, I don't know, however many things done in the hope that I get the result, I know that my result is not really satisfactory because my belief is missing,
Yeah.
right? So I'm somehow compensating, as you will, my actions for the lack of my belief. And then the result becomes like, yeah, so much fuss over nothing kind of a behavior, right? So, and that's why I'm learning more and more that, okay, it doesn't really matter at first what the actions are. What I want is to get my belief as to this is possible, as to believing that not only me wanting this change, but I want believing that others want this change as well. And then from that belief, deciding what actions get us there, and getting to that result, rather than I don't really believe that this can work, but I'm going to try to do that anyway. And then just, get things done and then tick the box. And then in the end, we have a result. And then we're like, yeah, it could have been better, but we did what we could. This a bit of like a depleting way of approaching things. I find that just in the end gets the result of, us depleting and then saying, yeah, we did. And then things didn't really happen. And I think these are the moments where I feel like that spirituality or that trust in myself really could be useful to say, no, I know that I am born to be capable of so many things, and I just need to yet explore what that is. And this life is given to me to explore that. And then once I go to that place, I become like so abundant and so resourceful to say, yeah, I can just choose to do this way. And then if it doesn't work, I can choose to do another way. But I know that I trust myself as well as I trust other people that we can get this work, and then we work on it. Do you know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
think this is where the spirituality element of it helps to not be in this mode of, no, let's just get things done, bite the bullet, and do whatever. But
Mm.
rather, no, I can do better, I can do in different ways, and I have all the resources available to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree with that. And I think if we look at it in like a historical sense, it's like the productivity that we praise in people now, we forget it has stemmed from systems of injustice through, slavery, or just oppressing one group of people to favor another and to
Yeah.
maintain wealth. And it's the same, although slavery, quote unquote, has ended, um, we are still in many ways, actually, the capitalist systems that are modeled to countries worldwide, particularly when you look at the divide between richer countries and poorer countries, although that's all relative anyway. But it's the modeling of what is prized to be the kind of most prestigious superpower system in the,
Mm.
is the capitalist lie that you need to constantly produce. And that's centered around an idea or a behavior or consciousness of greed, actually, because you've mentioned abundance, but the capitalist notion is actually centered around, though it is spun to you as if you have full liberty to create an abundance of your own, it's actually centered at the means in how you do that. And when you look at corporations who are constantly seeking to increase their profit, it's centered around a notion of greed, because people do it at any cost, even if that means climate change or ruining or harming people in the process, is seen as the means to the end. So when I think about all of that, I think it's absolutely imperative that for many of us who come from cultures that have, I would say, been used as the vehicle to move the people who are doing the oppressing, is kind of family embedded. When I look at, for example, my parents or their parents and how they have worked, their absolute, I would say, devotion to productivity and probably not resting in the process, it actually becomes, when you look at it in that lens, it becomes imperative that you do take rest, that somewhere along the line, someone has to break a cycle, and you have to make sure that you take rest, take stock of, I guess, where you fit in to society, why it runs the way that it does, to do something different, so that, as you say, you can perform the outcomes and the actions that you feel are more in line and in tune with who you are, as opposed to you being one body that is keeping the system going. And to link it again back to spirituality even more, when we think about, I guess, let's say indigenous cultures, way before this systems of like colonialization and all of that had even taken place. When you think about indigenous cultures and how they operated in their own communities, in their own countries or borders, wherever they were in the world, many of them centered and operated around the idea of a spiritual elder or elders that were given special kind of spiritually protected status, who would be involved in political decision making, who would be there to royalty, even in many countries and cultures across the world, who would be there as a sounding board to people who had any capacity to lead or who had impact on communities. They would be there to help bridge that kind of spirituality and ensure that the community or people were being, you know, adequately led by people. And a lot of the time those spiritual people were people who were elderly and who were respected. But now when you look at society as we are today, and I'm talking about in the West, like predominantly Europe, UK and America, we almost like erase our elderly population. We see them as having no bearing, no real benefit to society. That a lot of the time they're not even looked after by people within their own society. We ship them off to nursing homes or residential care homes where they stay there. But actually we need that embedded within our society, and we've lost touch of that, especially as we've moved to like more secular ways of being and doing. We've lost that connection. And I think I always, when I think of this and try and describe it when I have these conversations with people, I always try to bring really easy examples. And the easiest one that I can think of in this, that everybody relates to because it's such a lovable figure, is, you know, in Disney's Lion King, which many of us have seen, Rafiki is like the spiritual elder. He performs that role to Simba's dad and like the pride. And we all love Rafiki. And we understand, you know, his power, his significance, and his purpose. But that kind of dynamic, or Rafiki's role, is one that was always taken. There was always a space for that in many societies and many cultures. But in the systems that we have now, if you have people like that, it is a threat to systems. It's a threat to people even. Because it's only with, as you say, when you take that time to pause and reflect and reset for yourself, that you look at what is going on before you and you say, hold on, there's actually a different way of being. So you can see how they've worked hand in hand and also how they've had to be separated from one another.
Yeah, amazing. So I know that we might be getting to an end of our conversation. So what would you say for people who are thinking about it, for people who are practicing it, for people who are, you know, sensing it, feeling it, but not really bringing to their circle, bringing to their relationships, or bringing to their workplaces, bringing to the outside and saying, this is how I would like my life to be, or this is how I want to live, right? Or this is how I want to be in the world. What would you say I don't know, the easiest, the ways that we can start being and showing up and doing things as of today?
So I would say definitely stay committed to yourself, your own inner practice, whatever that is for you, in order for you to constantly connect with a higher consciousness, because that will continue to, as I say, do the things that rewire your brain in the long term to help you come out of the thought patterns or the conditioned ways of being, those things take time, and there is an integration that happens before it becomes an embodied practice. And I think so many people who have mastered this for themselves are quick to teach others, this is the solution that I have, and this is the steps, and this is what you do. But actually, that's kind of counterintuitive to the fact that in a spiritual path, it's a very individual thing that you have to go through. And in the time that it takes, however long that takes for you, the important thing is to stay committed and to be continuously aware of the progress that you are making and where you're falling short, because those things are just normal. And it can feel like there is a death in your identity and who you're being. It can feel like it's easier to just slip back into your identity that you carried in the conditioned way of being. But if you stick to it and you persist and you continuously refine your consciousness, your higher consciousness, you will find that naturally there is a time and a place where you will instinctively just know that something has to change. And in that moment, it will come with ease, because you are no longer attached to perhaps the shame of making a big decision as you were before. All of those things will come because you internally feel confident about what you're doing, you are at peace, you are prepared for whatever the fallout of whatever your decisions may be, but you are prepared internally to go through that. And when you do, all of the things that you perhaps have thought would be the things that would affect you and you don't know how you would deal with them, in a weird way, they almost fall away. They're not things that you are attached to, because through your spiritual walk, you become unattached now. You are connected to everything and everyone, but you're not attached to what may happen, good or bad. You just take it as it comes. And I know that can sound really that can sound almost like, oh, well, that's your experience, but how do I know that will happen for me? I'm not sure, I'm not certain. But having done a lot of work on this and spoken to many people, even yourself included, when we came and we connected and we spoke about this, even when we read like the great minds of people who are mystics, who are gurus, or people who have, had an enlightenment experience, everybody talks about this. This is no different. It's almost like I guess you would say the parameters of like things that are, I wouldn't say conditioned ways of being, but they're common ways of being. For every human being that has gone through some kind of spiritual awakening, we all feel the same things. We've all gone through the same experiences. They would look different to each of us, but they're more or less the same thing. And again, you will find, though you may be alone in your, in your spiritual walk, when you go high enough within it, you will find that you are drawn to the people who are on the same level as you. And you will again find a group of people who are your community now. You've traveled from a conditioned way of being into your community. And everything that I've just mentioned is exactly what I'm trying to provide as a framework, not to teach people like the steps of what to do or to strategize it, but actually to help, I guess, provide mentoring or resources to people who have questions around the conditioning, the connection and consciousness. Because one of the things that I found is if I'd had that resource where I could go to somebody just to ask the question and not to be swayed, because this does happen. We have to acknowledge that this happens in a spiritual space also. If you go to people for spiritual kind of advice, many people would try to enforce on you their own idea and their own interpretation. And I think it's very important that we have someone who is kind of neutral or impartial, who has gone through it, who understands it, and who can provide people who are curious with a framework that enables them to explore, self-exploration, is key within that. So yeah, to summarize, it's to stay committed to the connection to self, stay with the integration before it becomes a natural embodiment, and you will see that things that you feared will not be things to fear anymore, because you yourself have traveled to a higher form of consciousness.
Yeah, amazing. I think I just pick up on the wording of fear. I think in my experience, spirituality helps seeing that fear is an option. Of course, we need fear for many things in our daily lives of survival. I'm not saying that we altogether get rid of fear. That would be not good for our own safety. But I guess what I'm trying to say about the fear of, for instance, not making choices, not growing, not wanting to go forward, exploring things, and that fear can be also beautifully replaced with this this sense of uh, higher self, right? Of seeing fear as an option and seeing fear as no, I don't need to have it if I want to do something else or if I want to explore it. So that's why it's beautifully said. And I think for me, also to just share the experience of the self exploration, I think, was the biggest that I have done in terms of coming to spirituality. And as I said, that having that recognition and this belief that there is an amazingness within us that we can trust at all times, right? And as I said, this can be for other people, God or other divinities, but for me this has been like relatable myself, to say that there is something within that I can't really explain, that is there, that is so worthy, that cannot be questioned as to the worthiness or not, and that is this deep dignity, that depth of something amazing um, that don't need to be questioned, and recognizing that and shining that out to the world, no matter what the circumstances is, and then acting from there helped me realize that, like you were saying, not being attached, right? Not being attached to a particular thing, or not being attached to a particular person, or not thinking that this person is better than me, or this person is, I don't know, smarter, or whatever the thing that my default brain usually tells me to do, but rather say no. I recognize their uniqueness, but I also recognize my own uniqueness, and I'm in awe with that, and I know that I can handle from that place. It may not always work, and I recognize that as well, like being a human and having this survival brain, and that's normal, but always knowing that there is that part of me that I can rely on and then act from there. And I think exploring that for everyone, what that is, and exploring that, having that peace with yourself to say, I have this spirituality, I have this um I'm part of this amazing world that I can't really explain in words, but that is good enough for me to say I can live my life the way I want to, act in the way that is right for me, and rely on that wisdom. So this is, I guess, what I would share that has been my experience, and I hope that people can find their own experiences and also shine that through to the world, to the workplace, to the person in the relationship, to anyone around us, and to be that, I guess, to be that person that we all want to be, unique and amazing human beings. So I don't know. I feel like I'm talking a lot about amazingness, and I don't know how it comes along, but I trust that everyone explores and finds this for themselves, right? So I guess the point that we really wanted to make to today was that explore areas or feel areas of your life that you otherwise don't really feel. No need to explain things all the time. No need to have everything logical and rational all the time. No need to be productive or effective and efficient or organized all the time, but just being and loving yourself and others around you for just being this amazing human. That's where spirituality can help us. So, Navshika, having said this, thank you so much for this amazing conversation that I felt like I've enriched myself even more. You
Likewise.
know, yeah, having just this conversation where you can just feel the other human being and feel their amazingness and thinking, oh, I love being in this world, having these people around me and just being grateful for that. So
Absolutely. Thank you.
have an amazing time, you all. And if you have any questions to Nafshika or to me, we put the contact details in the notes, and then you can always reach and let us know how your journey is. Thank you so much.